Well, greetings fellow dwarfers, welcome to another one of my episode breakdowns. Today, Series 1, Episode 5, Confidence and Paranoia. Now this is a really interesting one to break down because unlike previous episodes which have just looked at the deleted scenes, I've looked at the remastered editions and any details that might have come from the Series 1 documentary, this particular episode, we get a decent long section from Dave Holland's Space Cadet. Now for those who don't know, before creating Red Dwarf, the writers were involved in a radio show called Son of Cliche and wrote a sci-fi comedy radio show called Dave Holland's Space Cadet, which was very, very similar in concept to a lot of parts of Red Dwarf, and sketches from that would appear in Red Dwarf over the seasons, and this is the first time we get a proper long section lifted straight from Dave Holland's Space Cadet, so I'll point that out when we get to it. And just to add more details that make this episode interesting, this episode was meant to close out the series and be episode 6, but after the electrician strike which delayed all of the start of filming, the creators decided to rearrange things and ditch the episode Body Snatcher that they'd already written. Body Snatcher was originally meant to be in second place of the run, but everything got shifted up and Me Squared was added in 6th place as a brand new episode, having a lot of elements in it that were similar to Body Snatcher. We'll cover this more at the end of the episode because it influences how the episode ended. So diving into the episode, we get the usual moody opening, and the gag this week is talking about the lowest form of life in the universe, being a man who works in the post office. This gag was completely changed for a whole new one in the remastered versions, and they didn't even bother to film Holly, they just did it in voiceover. We then join Lister in the drive room watching a terrible sounding cheesy movie. The man's voice in the movie sounds a lot like someone doing an impression of James Stewart, who of course is famous for appearing in It's a Wonderful Life, which in Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers, It's a Wonderful Life is Dave's favourite movie and becomes the basis for his entire fantasy life within Better Than Life. Holly's a bit bored and keeps interrupting the film a few times, and Lister manages to spill milkshake right down himself. It's gross, but very funny. Holly interrupts again and says that he's read everything ever written, and that the worst book ever written was Football, It's a Funny Old Game by Kevin Keegan. And here we get our Dave Holland's Space Cadet section. Holly decides that he's going to try and build a woman, but doesn't even know where to start. This entire joke, almost word for word, is lifted straight from Dave Holland's Space Cadet, Episode 2, Norweb. Except there it's the pilot Dave Holland saying the joke rather than the computer.
Past the time if I created a perfectly functioning replica of a woman.
I have decided to build an android in the image of a woman.
I wouldn't even know how to make the nose.
I don't even know what to make the nose out of.
Holly gets Dave to delete all of the Agatha Christie novels from his memory so that he can read them all over again. You know what, I bet there's a lot of people who wish they could do this after a good book finishes. And to perform the deletion of Holly's memory, it was great to see Dave typing away on a classic bread bin Commodore 64, perfectly retro and perfectly suited to Red Dwarf. Holly instantly forgets all the Agatha Christie books, but also forgets the instruction that he gave Dave to delete them. This style of memory deletion joke would be seen again, briefly, with Rimmer and Crichton doing it in Series 10, Episode 1 Trojan, and a longer version of the joke in The Promised Land. Lister tries to finish the movie in his bunk before Rimmer arrives and turns it off at the crucial moment again. Rimmer insults Lister for slobbing around before Lister says he went up to the officer's block in the morning. Rimmer tells him that the officer's block hasn't been decontaminated, much to Lister's annoyance, as Rimmer had previously said that he'd get it done that week. Funny that Lister managed to find an important task not completed by Rimmer, moments after Rimmer had insulted Lister for being too lazy. And here we're given a vital piece of information which many a newbie to Dwarf have asked over the years. Why, if these two hate each other, don't they just live apart? Or at least go to a larger, more swanky quarters? Well, at this stage of the show, the answer is very simple. Many other areas of the ship need decontaminating of whatever residual radiation, chemical or biological matter might still be lurking there. In fact, the side effect of ignoring this is about to become the main plot element in just a minute or so. Dave talks about having been to the officers' quarters to look at Kachansky's dream recorder, where she dreamed about him 3 times. We'll actually see Kachansky's quarters very briefly in Series 2 Episode 4 Stasis Leak, whereas the dream recorder itself would appear prominently in Series 2 Episode 6 Parallel Universe, with that fantastic cat moment tongue-tied. Rimmer has Holly brush his teeth and shave him, which looks great. It's a great piece of physical acting from Chris Barry. In the remastered versions, they add a load of sound effects on top of this, just for those who, I don't know, aren't bright enough to figure out what he's doing.
Clean my teeth, please, Holly. I mean, it must mean something. Clean my teeth, please, Holly. I mean, it must mean something. Shave, please, Holly. Mister, you ought to take a good long shave, please, Holly. Mister, you ought to take a good long...
Rimmer claims to be a love celibate, but then admits to having slept with Yvonne Magruder. This is the first mention of Yvonne, who we'll hear about a lot over the years, and even get to meet a dream version of her in Series 2, Episode 2, Better Than Life. In the book, Last Human, Yvonne is given far more detail and described as having become pregnant with Rimmer's son, Michael Magruder. There's a lot more of the story to go into, I can't possibly go into it all now, but it's definitely worth checking out the novel if you want more details. Dave wakes up in the night at 3:30 in the morning, covered in sweat, clearly unwell. As he gets off his bunk, we can see his blanket clearly has been stolen from the Titan Hilton Hotel, which we'll visit in Series 2, Episode 4, Stasis Leak. After Dave leaves, Rimmer settles back to sleep to seemingly continue dreaming about Yvonne Magruder. A nice little bit of foreshadowing of the upcoming plot point that things discussed while awake will often form a crew member's dreams. Dave collapses in the corridor and the cat finds him but just doesn't help. The cat has been busy spraying stuff, making it his. We'll hear him and a fake female polymorph cat talk about making things theirs in Series 12, Episode 6, Can of Worms. Holly announces there's an emergency going on and calls Rimmer to the corridor. The cat is then seen playing with his food, just like how a pet cat might torment a mouse. Rimmer rushes in to get the cat to try and help him move Lister, as being a hologram he can't pick him up himself. The cat of course doesn't want to help, so Rimmer has to make do with the scutters. In the medical unit, Lister is awake and Rimmer is trying to take his temperature using the scutters, who nearly take out Dave's eye. The unreliable, bad radio control of the scutters on set meant that this nearly happened for real. Lister just thinks he has pneumonia, but Rimmer, correctly, thinks that the pneumonia has evolved over the last 3 million years. Lister wishes that he'd asked out Kachansky in the past and says she might have said yes, stranger things have happened, to which Rimmer replies with 2 examples of stranger things: the spontaneous combustion of the mayor of Warsaw and the time it rained herring in 12th century Burgundy, both events that we'll see recreated later in the episode. Lister says him and Chen had a theory that everyone has 2 people inside of them, their confidence and paranoia. Much like Rimmer, Lister would also have his theory proven right later in the episode. Well, kind of, they're figments of imagination formed by his dreams, but I'm going to take it as proof. The scutters release Lister a bit too harshly and throw him across the room. It's almost like the director is poking fun at the real world lack of control that the scutters had. In the bunk room, Lister is on the bed dreaming and hallucinating while Rimmer tests out a few salutes, including the full double Rimmer. I can't help thinking that letting Dave use the top bunk while he writhes around and hallucinates isn't the safest of things to do. Rimmer then tries a few necrobic exercises before it begins raining fish. This was done using real dead fish, which apparently weren't smelling too fresh after a few hours up near the hot lighting gantry. Rimmer asks Holly what's happening, but Holly just gives details of where he's up to in his Agatha Christie book. Clearly he's reading Murder on the Orient Express, and, spoiler alert, he's already figured out the ending. Holly doesn't know why the fish are falling and re-references the same time it rained herring in 12th century Burgundy, before the mayor of Warsaw arrives and spontaneously combusts. What we presume is the next morning, the cat arrives with a few gifts for Lister, and they're absolute crap. He then nicks Dave's bedding and lays on Rimmer's bunk. The cat giving crappy gifts will be shown again in Season 3 Episode 6, The Last Day. Rimmer tries to talk to Lister, but the cat is so self-obsessed that he assumes that the speech is directed at him and ends up getting insulted and leaves. We get Rimmer try to explain about the hallucinations being solid to Dave, with a funny little speech where he keeps saying that things are solid, even though Dave isn't understanding him. When you think about it, it's a shame that Dave didn't dream about Kachansky or the rest of the crew. Could have brought them all to life. Perhaps a dream about a time machine might have been really helpful, or a faster than light drive. The possibilities are endless. Perhaps they should have tried to bottle that disease and use it in emergencies. In the drive room, we meet Confidence and Paranoia. Confidence is eating a meal, which kind of shows that Confidence and Paranoia aren't just solid hallucinations made out of, space dust. They must be real flesh and blood people, as Confidence eating a meal kind of shows that. Confidence was played by Scottish comedian Craig Ferguson, who seems to have been everywhere, from an episode of One Foot in the Grave to cracking the States hosting the CBS late night talk show, The Late Late Talk Show, with Craig Ferguson. And for any Whovians out there, he even spent a couple of years drumming with Peter Capaldi's punk band, The Dream Boys. Also, Craig was at one point considered for the part of Captain Hollister. Paranoia was played by Lee Corns, who's been in just about every cult British show from the 80s. The Young Ones, Blackadder, Bottom, and of course Red Dwarf. He's also got a Doctor Who connection, having appeared in a 1982 episode, Kinda. Also, Lee was once in the running for a recurring part, having been considered for Rimmer at one point. Back to the drive room, Confidence is ridiculously gushing over Dave, while Paranoia is someone you wouldn't want to be around for more than 30 seconds. Rimmer suggests they arrest the hallucinations and says that the two are symptoms of Dave's illness. Again, Rimmer is right. We see the dust storm forming outside the ship, which was later replaced in the remastered versions by some lovely 90s CGI. In the bunk room, Lister plays the Indling song with one chord through the whole song. But hey, Confidence thinks it's brilliant. Confidence is shown to have kept one of Dave's used cigarettes because his kissing lips had touched it. Confidence sounds a bit like a 13-year-old girl with a crush. Confidence's trousers are far too tight. I'll leave that image with you. And we see a Polaroid of Kochanski, which made me wonder, did Dave take the Polaroid? Which seems unlikely considering Holly said in a previous episode that him and Kochanski only shared a few hundred words, so getting her to pose for a picture seems unlikely. So perhaps more likely the Polaroid is from Kochanski's room. It was something she already had in her possession. Confidence suggests that they bring Kochanski back as a hologram. We then switch to the drive room where Paranoia and Rimmer are talking about Lister's kissing practice, while a scutter arrives with an absolutely lethal looking huge syringe to presumably try and take out Paranoia. Lister and Confidence arrive and say that Holly's figured out a way to run two holograms at once, but Rimmer still refuses to help and won't give him the personality disc for Kochanski. During the conversation, Confidence mentions beer milkshake, which we saw Dave having for breakfast in the previous episode. Confidence also sings a line of the Indling song, far better than Dave had managed to sing it a moment ago. So is this perhaps how Dave thinks his own music sounds in his head? With Confidence's urging, Lister manages to actually figure out where the disc must be, so it looks like Dave is capable of great things if he can just keep his paranoia quiet. Rimmer finds that the medical unit's been smashed up, and then the ship in a dust storm is shown. This was filmed by having the miniature point straight up and dropping debris on top. Again, this was later replaced by a CGI version. I'll let you guys decide which you think looks better, the world-class team making miniatures or the 90s ropey CGI. Dave in the drive room is dressed for a spacewalk and asks Holly how long's left of the dust storm. Holly's still distracted by Agatha Christie reading. In Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers, Holly was able to read entire volumes of literature in a matter of nanoseconds before he went on to be senile. So it shows just how much he's slowed down if it's taken a whole episode to read Orient Express. Confidence arrives, also in a spacesuit, and Rimmer arrives and shows Lister the smashed up medical unit. Rimmer's worked out that the hallucinations have done it to stop Lister getting better, and that the hallucinations are dangerous. With two extra comedians in this episode, it's great to see that the writers took the good decision to make Rimmer the straight guy for this episode, as he's actually being really efficient, helpful and clear thinking. I think this is a great way of using Rimmer. Having him be wacky and strange amongst everyone else could have just been way too much. Back to the drive room, Rimmer also wants to know where Paranoia is, but Confidence just gives him a daft answer. After Confidence and Dave leave, Rimmer asks Holly to trace Paranoia, but has to explain what a trace means. Not knowing what a trace is, it's a wonder that Holly can actually read Agatha Christie. He might be better with a Mr. Men. Holly can't find Paranoia anywhere aboard ship. We then get some great looking views of the outside of the ship, opening with a really great composite wide shot with the guys walking down the stairs on the ship's exterior. These are some great looking shots. Apart from Dave in Father and Sons flying through the ram scoop, we've never seen the guys on the exterior of the ship again. It looks great here. They should bring it back. Confidence reveals that he smashed up the medical unit and killed Paranoia, before being daft enough to take off his helmet and make himself explode violently. While making this scene, Craig Giles did manage to get hit by some of the debris from Confidence exploding, which is actually why he falls backwards like he does. And yes, I know, if you took off a helmet in a spacesuit, you wouldn't explode in real life, but it looks great here. In the bunk room, the cat is doing his laundry by licking his clothes, which is kinda gross, while Lister is preparing to meet Kochanski's hologram. Rimmer, truthfully, tells Lister that the personality disc he's got will only bring him misery. In the drive room, Lister practices meeting Kochanski before loading up the disc in an absolutely tiny looking hologram projection machine, very much smaller than the huge hologram projection rooms that we see in Thanks for the Memory and Queeg, both from Series 2. Also on the side of the hologram unit, it says Kochanski with the initials C and Z, implying that her middle name must start with a Z, but we never hear what it is. And also implying that Christine is spelt with a C, but we later find out in other episodes it's spelt with a K. So, is this a prop mistake? Or is C and Z meant to stand for something completely different? The machine then loads up a second version of Rimmer, who says, well, he did warn you. How on earth did this version of Rimmer load up and instantly know what's been going on? Very puzzling. So originally, as I mentioned earlier, this was going to be the final episode of the series, and this was going to be the last moment. And originally, they had planned to have Claire Grogan appear as Kochanski, but decided to change it to Rimmer so that they could set up their new last episode, Me Squared. The original Rimmer says that he wouldn't put Kochanski's disc in Kochanski's box, and announces, you think you had it bad before? Now you got it in stereo, baby. Infinity Welcome's Careful Drivers also has a very long sequence of the duplicate Rimmers. However, there it wasn't caused by Lister accidentally loading a second version, it was done by Rimmer himself, whilst the cat and Lister were off ship so that he could double his productivity. Of course, Rimmer being Rimmer, it didn't double it, it reduced it considerably. We'll save any more details about that for the next episode, as the dual Rimmer storyline is going to pick up more or less right where it left off next time in Me Squared. So guys, there we go. That is the episode Confidence and Paranoia. A lot of interesting things in here. Stuff pulled from Dave Holland's Space Cadet. Some stuff that's quite different in the novels, and a big change at the end where they were setting up an extra episode for this season rather than ending the season with Kochanski. It's strange to think how different Red Dwarf could have been if Kochanski was brought back at the end of the first season. That would have been a massive change to the whole way the show works. I'm glad that they didn't, because, well, I love Red Dwarf as it is, I wouldn't change a thing. But guys, let me know what you think. Should they have brought back Kochanski? Would that have been really interesting? Or just a bit weird? And I've got to recommend, if you've got time, go and watch Body Snatcher. This is the lost episode that they never produced, but they did write the script for, and the storyboards were produced. You can go watch that episode voiced by Chris Barry. It's on YouTube right now. Go look at Body Snatcher. I think you'll find it really interesting, because there's lots of elements that appear in this episode, in the next episode, and there's even jokes and gags in there that I can see where they spread those out through all the episodes of the series. Really, really worth watching, just to get an understanding of the kind of writing process and how one episode could get filtered into many. Well guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode breakdown. Me Squared, I've already started writing that. It's really interesting the way it just follows straight on. I can't wait to share that with you. If you want to see that, make sure you subscribe so you know when the next episode comes out, and hit the bell icon so you get notifications. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this one, and guys, anything you want to say, anything you want to comment, stick it down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate every one of you, and I'll see you next time, Smegheads.